Hi everyone, welcome to the TriEssence martial art channel. So first of all, as always, hope everyone's still healthy and safe. And just to let you guys know, a friend of mine passed away a couple of days ago due to COVID-19. It's not really like a particularly close friend of mine. We don't hang out all the time, but I did know the person for the past 18 years, so it still comes as quite a shock. And her husband is now also diagnosed to be positive with the virus, and we don't know if he's gonna pull through or not yet. So my point is, the threat is quite real. Now, of course, I believe most of my viewers are the type of rational mind that shouldn't need me to remind them that the threat is real. But just in the off chance that there are some of you who's watching my videos that don't take this seriously, I would recommend you to take it seriously, right? I don't know why, but I have heard that people in America, in Australia, and other countries as well, that believe the whole lockdown is nonsense. They don't believe in social distancing. They think it's just any common flu. Well, I wish that to be the case, but sadly it is not. People are dying from it. I mean, yes, people do die from common flu as well, but I think the death rate of this one is actually higher than common flu. I mean, I've not known a single person in my life that died from common flu, but now I do know someone, a friend who actually died from COVID, and her husband may or may not survive. It's yet to be seen. So yes, I do hope everyone take care and take the stress seriously. And obviously, if you have no choice, like if you work in the medical field or other professions that require you to to go out, you don't have a choice. But if you do have a choice, I would suggest you to minimize your contact with outsider. Completely eliminate it if possible. Keep your social distance, keep your lockdown, and hopefully eventually sometime this whole thing would will be water under the bridge, and then our life will go back to normal. Alright, so with that said, welcome to the 7th episode of Fact or Fiction in my video series, where we discuss about common misconception, myths, stories, and falsified claims, as well as certain real claims that involve in Chinese martial art community with different lineages, secret lineages, special lineages, and all of that. So today's video it's going to be about, as you can see on the whiteboard here, about Wang Yongquan and the Wang lineage of Yang style Taichi. Now, this isn't exactly a lineage that has a lot of false claims that we're going to expose. The main reason I'm doing an episode on Wang Yongquan and his lineage is mainly to act as a precursor for my next video. Like I've said in the past video, I am going to do videos on my 2 Taichi grandmaster. Now, I already did one on Wu Tunan. The next grandmaster, or the more important one in my lineage, is actually Shi Ming. However, in order to talk about Shi Ming, you have to kind of know where his lineage comes from. His lineage comes from Wang Yongquan's lineage of Taichi, and I am aware that Wang Yongquan is not very well known in the West. I do know his lineage has some students in America and some in Taiwan. But overall, this Wang lineage is relatively unknown compared to many of the other better-known lineages such as Chong Manqing, like the Dr. Yang guy in Canada. So I just thought that if I were to do a video straight away on Shi Ming and talk about his connection with the Wang lineage, and most of my viewers don't know what Wang lineage is, it will be less interesting. So which is why I'm gonna do an episode on Wang Yongquan first. So although there are not a lot of misconception or falsified claims and things like that I can expose, because it's quite a genuine lineage, there are there are still some topic and matters and issues that we can discuss. And hopefully by the end of the video, you have a better understanding to this lineage. So as I said, Wang Yongquan lineage is not very well known in the West. However, it is a relatively well-known lineage, at least in the Beijing's martial art community, especially the Beijing's Taichi community, right? Wang lineage is actually quite a large one. There are a few others, such as the Cui Zhongshan group, right? His grandfather is Cui Yishi, one of the head disciples that Yang Zhongfu left behind in Beijing. So there's that group. There's also a group that recently started to claim to be Funei Taiji, which is like almost like the imperial Taiji. You can translate to that. There's actually a misconception that some people think Wang lineage is the imperial Taiji. They're actually not the same. I have seen some Wang lineage people, I think in Australia, who claim that's Imperial Taiji. That's actually not correct, because the name's already taken, right? There is an Imperial Taiji in Taiwan who claim a lineage through all the way to Wang Lanting. He's one of the main disciples of Yang Luchan, who was the butler or the steward that worked at the prince's mansion where Yang Luchan taught, right? So there is already a lineage called Funei Taiji or the Imperial Taiji. There's also recently been one that's claimed in China, who I believe is not connected to the Taiwanese one. So there are quite a few people trying to use the name Imperial Taiji. The Wang lineage certainly does not use the name Imperial Taiji, not in Beijing, okay? Not by Wang himself, not by his disciples, and not by his grand disciples. So whoever that is using Imperial Taiji to describe Wang lineage is pretty much misusing the term. That's not something that I believe Wang Yongquan himself would have liked if he were alive. Okay, so let's quickly go through Wang Yongquan and how he got involved with Yang style Taiji and his lineage, etc. So Wang Yongquan was born on 1904, right? Just write the date here, in case some of you were wondering. He's born 1904. And I believe he died 1987, so he lived the age of 83. Actually, it's a bit less than Wu Tunan, which we covered last episode. Even if we take his real birthday, not the fake one, he still lived a bit longer than Wang Yongquan. But like I said in the last episode, age is not really a good indication of good practice in Taiji. It can be a partial indication, but how long you live, or how long you can live, is largely determined by your genetics, by your living style, your living habit, and many other factors, rather than whether you do good Taiji or not. So this will just come in handy when we talk about the lineages and things. So the special thing about Wang Yongquan, okay, so he's Manchurian, and his father, Wang Chonglu, okay, happened to be the steward or the butler, right? The guy who runs the mansion for one of the royal prince called Pulun Beile. So Pulun Beile is basically a cousin of the last emperor of the Qing dynasty, Puyi. Okay, they all have the same word in their name, right? Puyi, Pulun. And if you were to trace the ancestry, Pulun's lineage basically goes to the 11th son of Emperor Qianlong, who is the 4th emperor in Qing dynasty, right? It goes from Shunzhi, Kangxi, Yongzheng, Qianlong. Qianlong is perhaps one of the most famous emperors of the Qing dynasty. So his 11th son's lineage comes down all the way to this Pulun Beile. And at the time, Yang Jianhou was basically teaching Pulun Beile at his mansion. Okay, so we did talk about Yang Luchan teaching a prince. That's actually called Duan Wang. It's a different prince to this one. So basically, Yang Luchan was teaching at Duan Wang's mansion. Once Yang Luchan passed away, we don't know the reason, but they stopped teaching at that mansion. However, Yang Jianhou eventually started teaching in Pulun Beile, which is a separate prince, and was teaching him. So Wang Yongquan's father, Wang Chonglu, was basically the butler or the steward that manages that Pulun Beile's mansion, okay? And therefore, he was also called upon almost like a training partner for the prince. Okay, because the prince needs a training partner, and obviously he's not gonna train with peasants or servants. And other princes might not be interested in doing this, right? He was the only one that is interested, so he basically calls his own steward, which is the most convenient training partner. So in doing so, it basically introduced Wang Yongquan's father to Taiji, and Wang Yongquan started to learn Taiji. Wang Yongquan's father, right, Wang Chonglu, started to learn Taiji under Yang Jianhou, the head of the second generation Yang family. It is said that Wang Yongquan also started doing Taiji with his father at the age of 7. Now, this is a common practice back in the days, because back then they didn't really have schooling at 7, and they didn't really have TVs or games or other things to occupy the kids. So usually the kid follows the parent or whatever the father do, the kid does. So even though in today's environment, 7 I would say is really early to do Tai Chi, right? Kids usually get bored out of their mind and they hate this thing after a couple of weeks, and they would have like a mental shadow towards Tai Chi and would not try to do it for the rest of their life. So I don't recommend kids in modern day society do Tai Chi at the age of 7, but it is believable that Wang Yongquan started doing Tai Chi at the age of 7. Although I don't think he really can understand much at that age. He's just simply following around with the movement. I don't think intellectually he can understand the deeper side of Tai Chi. However, it is claimed by the Wang lineage that Wang Yongquan took instructions from Yang Jianhou. Now, this is also believable. I can't prove it to exactly have happened, but it is believable because, again, his father was learning under Yang Jianhou. So Wang Yongquan wasn't a disciple of Yang Jianhou. He just sort of followed his father to training sessions, and maybe Yang Jianhou on the side will tell him, okay, you gotta put your hand here, put your leg there, give him some advice and instruction. That is all very possible. But obviously, he's not a disciple of Yang Jianhou, right? That is very clear, and the lineage, as far as I know, do not claim such either. It is said that later on, when he got older, he became the demonstration target for Yang Shaohou, right? The third generation Yang family member, the one that was famous for his fighting ability. Now again, there are no hard evidence to prove that this did happen or did not happen, right? It's just Wang Yongquan's own word. However, it is likely to happen due to the reason that if Yang Shaohou was invited to do a demo for the prince or other members of the royal family, then Wang Yongquan would be a perfect candidate for demonstration, because Yang Shaohou can't demonstrate on any of the royal family members. That's kind of disrespectful. And it's also kind of difficult to bring in an outside student, right? For security reasons and social reasons. And Wang Yongquan, his father, being the steward of the prince, even though that is not the same level as a royal family, but he has the right to be present in the royal family gatherings. So Wang Yongquan naturally also has extended right to be there, and therefore it's far easier to just call him up and demonstrate on him than demonstrating on another student. So according to the Wang lineage, Wang Yongquan was basically sent out by Yang Shaohou on many occasions whenever he needed to do a demo. And being sent out numerously, he eventually started to understand how the mechanic works, the kind of power that Yang Shaohou make use of when he's doing these kind of demonstration. Now again, there's no evidence to suggest this or to disprove this, but I will say that it does make logical sense, okay? Because part of the internal training is to experience your master sending force onto you and feel what it feels like to be hit by that force. And later on, when your understanding progress and your own training progress, you can also sense the subtle changes in your own teacher or master's body when he sends you. So if he sends you a lot, then you actually are more likely to understand the mechanic behind it better. Of course, he will have to explain it to you as well, right? You can't just learn from getting hit all the time or getting sent. But it is definitely believable that if Yang Shaohou use him as a demonstration target a lot, that he will have a better understanding on Yang Shaohou's mechanic and how he sends that force than someone who has never experienced this, right? Even in my own training, my master is not very big on sending people around. He doesn't like to show off, so to speak, and he doesn't like to like some other people who like to send students flying just to prove that he's really good. My master doesn't do that, but whenever he wants to get a point across, he would show us. He would demonstrate that force or that mechanic on us, and he'll do it slow enough so that we can feel through holding his hand, wrist, or wherever, how his body come about and how that force comes out. And if we don't understand, he will do it again and again and again until we start grasping it. So this is definitely one of the training methods in Yang style Tai Chi, right? It is believable what Wang Yongquan and his lineage claims. And note that he didn't say he learned from Yang Shaohou, because we do know that Yang Shaohou is famously bad at teaching and he doesn't really teach well. I don't think he enjoys teaching either, right? So, not saying that he didn't learn from Yang Shaohou at all, because if you see the family all the time, then maybe when that Yang Shaohou is in a good mood, he will give you a few pointers. But the main focus here, that according to Wang Yongquan's claim, is that he got sent out a lot, and through that he began to understand Yang Shaohou's mechanics. And eventually, he was put under Yang Chengfu as a disciple, like everyone else, right? At the time, all the students and disciples were put under Yang Chengfu for the reason we've discussed in the past already, in the past episode, right? If you missed it, basically in a nutshell, Yang Shaohou's got bad temper, and Yang Jianhou know what that means by observing his own brother Yang Banhou, right? Who pretty much pissed off a lot of students, and they don't want to learn from him anymore. So obviously Yang Jianhou don't want that to happen during his generation. So he basically passed the student down to Yang Chengfu, who's a more mild and more patient person, rather than passing it all to Yang Shaohou, who most likely would drive most of the disciples and students away. So that's why everyone will put under Yang Chengfu. Now I know that there is quite a number of lineages today that claims that their master or grandmaster was put under Yang Chengfu, but was actually taught by Yang Jianhou. There's a lot of these claims, and they do these claims because nowadays Yang Chengfu has a very bad reputation, right? People say he can't fight, some say he didn't even train properly, some say he didn't even learn the full extent of his family art. There are a lot of negative rumors regarding Yang Chengfu. I've already talked about that in the previous episode on the downfall of the Yang family, so I'm not gonna go through that again. But what I can say is that some of the claims are true and some of them are false, right? For example, Tian Zhaolin, okay, he basically did indeed learn from Yang Jianhou, given his age as well as other collaboration on the story. For example, Wang Yongquan also claimed that Yang Zhaolin was taught by Yang Jianhou, but was eventually put under Yang Chengfu. So there are people like that, but there are also others who basically, made up the claim just to make their own lineage seem more legit. So Wang Yongquan was also under Yang Chengfu because he was relatively young at the time, right? So if he was born in 1904, and he started training at 7, that put her to 1911. No, sorry, yeah, to 1911. Oops, my math. And we know that Yang Jianhou passed away in 1917, so it basically he had 6 years where he could have seen Yang Jianhou. But like I said, from the age of 7 to perhaps the age of 13, I don't think he can really understand the deeper side of Taichi. So I don't believe he really learned anything significant from Yang Jianhou. But he definitely most likely have met Yang Jianhou and probably followed behind what Yang Jianhou taught, and maybe Yang Jianhou corrected him a couple of times, told him some stuff. It's all possible, but I don't think he really received any important teaching from Yang Jianhou, not at that age. But you have to bear in mind that his father was a disciple or a student of Yang Jianhou, so he could have received Yang Jianhou's teachings through his own father, right? So that's definitely possible. And it is possible that he was, the demonstration dummy for Yang Shaohou, and eventually he learned Taichi from Yang Chengfu. So he's one of the rare cases, not the only one, but one of the rare cases where he could have had knowledge from all 3 members of the Yang family. Yang Jianhou, like I said, not directly, but through his own father's experience, Yang Shaohou and then Yang Chengfu, which as a result made Wang Yongquan and Wang lineage of Taichi's understanding quite unique compared to some of the other more well-known lineages out there. Now I know that the most likely question that you guys really want to know is can he fight? And unfortunately I don't know. He has no official fight record, but there are stories of him during the I think it's during the either the Sino-Japanese War or somewhere along that line. He did supposedly saw a foreign soldier who was being disrespectful to some local Chinese, and he supposedly stepped up and and defeated the guy, but that's just a rumor, right? There's no evidence, and I can't really confirm it. So there is no real evidence to whether he can fight or not. But from experience, okay, I can say that his understanding and concept of Taichi is slightly different to other lineages that is found in Beijing, as well as lineages that I've came across overseas. And I will say that his understanding and approach is more likely to work in combat than some of these other lineages. So intellectually or theoretically speaking, I believe his approach has more potential. Okay, which is why I pretty much joined like a derivative branch of Wang Yongquan's lineage, right? From grandmaster Shi Ming. But we'll talk about that in the next episode. So basically, just to let you know, I've looked at a lot of different Taichi, especially around Beijing, and Wang lineage is probably the one that makes the most sense to me. So if I were to pick one that I believe has the most potential of working in a combat situation, it would be the Wang Yongquan lineage, right? That is my opinion. But he himself, there's no official fight record, so we don't know if he is capable of fighting or he's not. But what I do believe is that he did get at least, maybe not the full thing, but he did keep saying that he only got maybe 30% of the Yang family's knowledge. He don't claim that he's got everything. He said he got a very small portion. But based on what I've seen from this lineage, they power generation does tend to hint towards Yang Shaohou's influence, right? Yang Shaohou is famous for generating short power that in Chinese we call it 断手. It means to break force, break power. It doesn't mean to physically break something. It just means that the force breaks off the moment you generate, and that kind of force sits inside the body and hurts them. Whereas there's another one that's displacement force, which you generate a very long force, and the object or the person get hit, and he will keep getting propelled backwards even after you've stopped contact, right? That's called long force or displacement force. It continues. 断力 or break force, you basically hit something and you cut off right away. The person doesn't move far, but they get injured inside. So Yang Shaohou is famous for using 断力. Yang Chongfu is famous for using the displacement, the long force. And from the Wang lineage's understanding and practice, I do believe that he does have the understanding from Yang Shaohou's short damaging force. I mean, he does have the long force as well, right? But he's one of the few lineages where I have seen the demonstration of the short force. So that's why personally I do believe that he definitely did get something from Yang Shaohou, whether it's direct teaching or being demonstrated on, and then he kind of fought it himself or whatever other means. But I do believe there's something unique here. So basically, let's talk a little bit on the theory side, right? So the Wang lineage, okay, so we know that in Taichi, I think I've talked about this in my video on the secret behind Taichi, that when it comes to combat, Taichi follows the four stages, right? So your first is engaging or contact, 接. Next one is 画, which is to dissolve. The next one is 拿, which is to seize. And I've said in the last video on the secret behind Taichi, seize is not a joint lock. It's not to grab something. You seize his force or his center or his balance, right? You seize that. And then the last is connect or contact, 接, 画, dissolve. You basically render his incoming force harmless to you. You seize his force 拿, and then 发, which is to send, or whether you send him flying or you issue force to hit them, that's the last stage. So for any combat approach to be called Taichi, it has to go through these four stages. Of course, these four stages don't happen very slowly. It happens in an instant, right? Eventually, it almost feels like it happens simultaneously, but there are still these four stages. Now, a lot of the people that I have met in recent years, right, and I've also seen on videos, etc., from other lineages of the Yang family Taichi, they basically do this by letting someone say, for example, this is just one example, right? Someone pushes him, he will sink, relax, and let the incoming force sink all the way into the ground and compresses their body like a spring. And then the rebound force comes back, and they use that to send the person backwards. Okay, so that is one example of the 4 stages of 接话拿发. However, and it's not wrong, right, to have that understanding. However, that is very detached from real application, because when somebody throws a punch at you, it's not the same as when someone pushing at you, especially when someone pushing at you, trying to seek your center, which makes it easier for you to sink that force down, compress yourself, and rebound it back. But when someone punches you, it is a much faster, aggressive force. It's much shorter, right? It doesn't go into your center. It doesn't go to the ground, which is why a lot of people that can do that, they can't actually make that work when someone's throwing punches into their face. Okay, even if they just punch the body, they can't let someone punch their body like a boxer, right? Like someone who can do that, ask the boxer to punch their body, and they can absorb the force and bounce the boxer back. It doesn't work like that. Not saying that understanding or practice is completely wrong, but it is not the final step. So according to the Wang lineage, they have a different approach or understanding to these 4 stages, right? So these 4 stages is not wrong, but they have another explanation for it called 点断拍 or 点断发, right? 点断拍 I think is the official term. 点 means the point of contact, 断 means to cut off the person's force, and pai is basically to issue force and send the person flying. So what that means is they're not trying to bring the force in and compress it down, make yourself into a spring, and then rebound the force back. Basically, upon contact, they're there to cut off the opponent's force. It's hard to explain this sitting down here, right, without a partner. So just bear with me. So you aim to cut off the force and you cut off his balance, and at that moment you send him flying. Of course, there are more details on how to do it, but this just gives you a general idea of the difference between the Wang lineage's theory versus the conventional theory that you find in most other Yang family lineages, right? So that they don't actually bring the force in, they don't compress themselves. Rather, they connect, and at that split contact point, they already cut off the opponent's force and balance, and the moment that happens, they will send their own force through. So what that means that it is faster, and it in theory can deal with a shorter force or a faster strike, rather than someone having to push you with a slow long force in order for this to happen. So basically in Taichi, there are few stages when it comes to dealing with force. There's 借力, which is to borrow or lend someone's force. Having someone push you and you compress in and you bounce them back, that's basically borrowing his force and then using it against him. So basically what the Wang Ma talks about is basically 借力. 借力 means to intercept or to cut off the force. So I don't even let his force get in my body, right? Your body becomes almost like a balloon. The moment that force touches the outer barrier, it inflates and already causes the person to be unstable on the feet as well as on the contact point, and already makes it, and it will already primes him up for the force that you're about to generate. And another important thing is that you don't need the person's incoming force to generate power. You can generate your own power, right? The type of approach that have to let others push in and then bounce them out, from what I can see, maybe I'm not completely right, maybe there are people who are different or exceptions to this, but from what I've met so far, they struggle to generate their own force, right? They are good at letting someone else push in and they basically compress that force and send it back to them. But if I don't push him, I don't give him any force, ask him to just send me with his force, they usually can't do that. So in the Wang lineage, basically, there are both these forces. There are the force that goes down, right? And there's the force that comes back by itself. It doesn't have to go down. It doesn't have to let someone else feed you a force before you can repel it with another force. But again, this is probably better for a practical video. So this is just to give you a rough idea of how the Wang lineage's understanding and approach is different. I mean, it's not completely different, right? Not saying the other lineage's approach is wrong. You can see that they share similarities, but just on a few details that there are differences, which is what I think makes the Wang lineage more likely to have success in a combat situation than the other approach. Alright, next we're gonna talk about the Yang Shaohou frame, right? I've also talked about this in past videos. In the recent decade or 2 decades, has been a huge, not huge, but it has been a lot of claim to some secret frame either from Yang Banhou or Yang Shaohou. And as I explained in the past, he's basically based on the mentality that, okay, if Yang Zhengfu can't fight and he wasn't good, then Yang Banhou and Yang Shaohou could fight. So if I claim a lineage or a secret frame from either of the two, it makes my lineage looks better and sound better, and I can attract more students. But I've already mentioned in the previous episodes that I don't believe in any secret frames. Okay, I don't believe the secret of Tai Chi lies in which frame you do, which sequence you do. I believe it lies in the 10 principles, the understanding of body mechanic, and how to apply that body mechanic. For example, like what we mentioned on 点断拍, right? Point of contact, break, and send, for example. It boils on that. It doesn't bother what frame you do. I know there are some people who claim that Wang Yongquan teaches either a Yang Jianhou frame or a Yang Shaohou frame. Personally, I don't think he himself ever claimed that. He doesn't say he have a different frame. And furthermore, from what I can gather, a lot of these claims that other people makes, for the Wang lineage, they say that he does a smaller frame, which is the Yang Shaohou's small frame, and rather than Yang Zhengfu's big frame. Okay, but I'm gonna show you a video here, which is the only video of Wang Yongquan doing Tai Chi. And as you can see in this video, his movement is pretty big. And in his writing, he also talks about the bigger movement, which is there to build foundation. So I don't think he does a separate frame to anyone else from the Yang family at the time. Neither do I think that Yang Shaohou's frame is completely different from Yang Zhengfu's frame. Okay, at least the sequence and the form should be the same. It's just the personal understanding that may be different. And over here you can see a video of Wang Yongquan's eldest disciple, Zhu Huaiyuan, doing a Tai Chi form. And from this you can see that Zhu Huaiyuan's movement is much smaller than Wang Yongquan. However, that doesn't mean that he's doing a secret small frame. It just means that he reached a stage where his movement becomes smaller. So the whole large movement and small movement is not really a different teaching or a separate form or different frame. It's just at what stage of the training you are at, right? Everybody starts big and they eventually go small. Like there's a say in Chinese martial arts community, 大动不如小动，小动不如不动，不动并非不动，而是生生内动。What that means is large movement is not as good as small movement. Small movement is not as good as not moving. But this not moving is not actually no moving, it's internal moving. Okay, so what this complicated saying actually means is that you start from big movement and then you go to smaller movement, eventually you go to internal movement. But everyone had to start big, so no one starts with small frame. Okay, so therefore I don't believe there is a separate small frame from the big frame. Is it always the same form? Each person's sequence might be different. Maybe in Wang Yongquan's form there's some movement that are different to Yang Zhengfu's final addition of the form. People can change a move, add a move, remove a move, so that is all possible. But I don't think the form itself is completely different. There is no secret in the form, right? The secret is in the training, in the concept, in the principles, in the requirements, in the body mechanics, not in the form. Yeah, so another principle from the Wang lineage that is different to some of the other lineages that I've encountered in the past is that he believes that when you are doing Tai Chi, the better you are, the lighter your feet get. Right? I have met Tai Chis that in the past where when they actually want to be heavier, they want to have roots, they want to be not movable, and also the whole idea that someone pushes you and you sink the force down and the force bounces back. It kind of resulted in a mentality where their feet are very grounded on the floor. The Wang lineage actually doesn't believe that, nor do they believe in pushing with your feet to propel your body forward, right? Instead, they believe that there is a force that travels down and travels up. And by this, I'm not meaning someone else pushes you. Your own force travels down and travels up. We're not going to go into detail with that. This is just to another idea on how his lineage is a bit different from the other lineages that I've encountered in the past. And so basically what this means is that the body in some degree functions like a table. Okay, when you slap a table, the moment you slap the top of the table, the force is already reached the ground, and the rebound force already comes back up. Right, the table doesn't change form, it doesn't push against your hand, the table does nothing, it's a dead medium. It's the force that travels down and travels up. So in Wang Yongquan's lineage, when you are issuing force, your leg don't push, your feet don't push. They actually remain relatively relaxed. And the weight on the foot is not heavy either, meaning they can hold an incoming force with their hand, for example, hold someone's, if I were to push my Taichi brother really, really hard, he's able to hold that force and still move his foot or his feet freely. He's not rooted to the ground in order to receive my force. And that also correlates to what we said earlier of Dian Duan Pai, right? He's cutting off my foot at the point of contact. He's not drawing it in and sinking to the ground. Because if he does that, his feet will be grounded because my force is pushing it down. So again, this is also a very different principle. And this is important because if you can do this, you are free to move. And if you were to fight, you need to be mobile on your feet. You can't be stationary. Okay, one of the issue with the other approach, right? I'm not saying it's wrong, right? But I do think it's problematic when it comes to fighting. The reason why, even the people who can do that connection, rebound force, the spring thing very well, the reason they struggle to fight is because they are too stationary. This only work when they are stationed. It falls apart when someone stops moving around and dodging, using fast stairs, moving around and try to throw punches. Then they can't keep up, and then everything falls apart. So that's another reason why I believe the Wang lineage do have a better chance, at least in theory, to work in the fighting environment than the other approaches of the Yang family Taichi. Okay, next part, I've basically been requested by a Patreon supporter to talk about the following video. So I'm gonna let you watch a little bit. Now I'm not gonna show the full video. If you want to see the full length of this video, you can just Google YouTube Wang Yongquan's name, and this video should come up in among the top of the search result. So the Patreon supporter Thomas has asked me to briefly talk about this. Now I have talked about this in my past video called the Introduction to Authentic Taiji. If you have not seen that video, I'm gonna try to put a link on top somewhere if I can figure out how it works on YouTube. But if not, you can also find that video in my YouTube channel's playlist. I pretty much covered this topic in that video, okay? But I'm gonna briefly talk about it here, and I will be talking about this topic in the next video when I talk about my own grandmaster, right? That's one of the main sources of his controversy. But in short, what you see on this video is neither real nor fake, right? What that means is the person on the receiving end is not faking it. He's not doing those, he's not falling over by himself. He's not jumping by himself. He's not reacting by himself. He is feeling something from Wang Yongquan. But it's also not 100% real in the sense that if I tense up and resist, someone who's doing that, whether it's Wang Lao or somebody else, it will not affect me, okay? So I have met people, quite a few, in my lineage and in other Taichi lineages, who can do that. Maybe not on the same level as Wang Yongquan, but it doesn't matter, okay? That kind of phenomenon, it doesn't affect people if you are willingly resisting it. However, if you connect your body and you try to just, be blank in your mind and your body, then that force does affect you and cause your body to do stuff like either falling back or maybe a little hop or some other response. So it is not. So the people that is receiving it is not faking it, but it does not work on people who are unwilling to let it work. So that's why it's not real in the sense that it's not a practical ability, but it is also not something that the receiving guy, the student, are faking it to please the master. Now the reason there is something like this is actually a device or a way to show the student how certain power is generated. So in this kind of setup, the student is not resisting the force. If you resist the force, it's almost like if you do push hand and you are tense, you don't feel what other guys do. You only feel yourself. So if you are in that situation and you tense up, then you're not learning anything. You are just fighting force with force or force without force. But if I want to understand how a certain power is being generated, whether it's Peng, Lü, Ji, An, or any of the other forces, I will try to blank out my body, connect it, but blank it out without an intention or a direction or a force, and then try to feel my master's body and his structure, and see which part of his body moves, not with eye but with feeling on the contact point. You see how his waist move, or what move first, that his hip moves and his waist and his spine, and try to grasp how that force comes out and get into me. And a master would do it in a way similar to Wang Lao, so that I can feel the pure mechanic of the internal work. If he were to issue a hard force, I'll just fall out. I'll just fall back. I can't actually feel the detail nearly as clear. So basically, this is a way to show how the mechanic is being done. It is not a combat application. It is not a force used to hit people. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that and think that this is actually how Taiji claim that they will fight with people, or how to hit people for real. And in doing so, they think this whole thing is woo-woo, right? It's fake. Now, I'm not saying there are not people out there, such as Yan Fang, right? She's one of the very famous case, where they do use this and things similar to this, like no touch KO, which we'll again talk about in the next episode with my own grandmaster. There are people who use that to attract students and claim this is how you can self-defend yourself. But that is basically the misinterpretation of this phenomenon. This phenomenon is a training method. It is not a combat method. Alright, and lastly, we're gonna just look at one small controversy in the Wang lineage. So basically, I think those of you that might know Wang Quan lineage, you definitely heard of someone called Wei Shu Ren. Okay, let me just write his name here so that you guys know who we're talking about here. So it's Wei Shu Ren. And he's actually a figure of some controversy within the Wang lineage. So he started studying under Wang Yongquan, I think, in 1982, and as you can see, Wang Yongquan passed away in 1987, so he had about 5 years with Wang Yongquan. And of course, towards the later like the last years or two of Wang Yongquan, he wasn't really healthy and he was on wheelchairs. So I don't know how much he can actually teach. In any case, so basically, Wang Yongquan wrote a book, and this is according to some members of the Wang lineage, right? I'm not going to mention names because this is kind of a politics going on in there. But there are members who mention that Wang Yongquan wrote a book, and he asked Wei Shu Ren to help him check the spelling and the grammar and all of that, because Wei Shu Ren supposedly is a college graduate with good education. And basically, Wei Shu Ren took that manuscript and then eventually published a book and forced his own name on it. So it's co-written by Wang Yongquan and Wei Shu Ren, and this pretty much upsetted a good portion of the Wang lineage, especially the older disciples. And they kind of propelled Wei Shu Ren to be one of the main or the top disciples of Wang Yongquan. But if you look into the history of it, he only had 5 years. Not saying 5 years you can't learn a lot, but I don't think he is one of the top disciples of Wang Yongquan. I don't even think he's any good personally. That's just my opinion. So you are welcome to believe otherwise. But yeah, I don't believe he's that good, and also, I don't think he co-wrote the book, right? He basically took the manuscript from Wang Yongquan and sort of just put his name on it alongside Wang Yongquan to elevate his own status. So this is probably the only controversy that I can think of in this Wang lineage. They're pretty genuine and down-to-earth people. I haven't interacted with a lot of them, but I do know some, and I've known people who knows them. And they seem pretty down to earth. They're not like money grabbing, at least not the ones I know. Like they don't even charge money when they teach. And even Wang Yongquan himself was quite down to earth. He didn't charge a lot of money. He didn't get rich from doing it. So they're pretty nice people in general. Except maybe Wei Shu Ren. I think he did make quite a few bucks from elevating himself thanks to the book, and have wealthy people coming to learn from him. That's why personally I don't like him so much. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's a nice person. I don't know. I haven't met him in person. But from what I hear, he's not that nice of a person. the rest of lineage are pretty decent people and friendly. But I think that's it for this episode. There's really not that much to talk about Wang Yongquan lineage, because I said they didn't make any falsified claim or crazy claim. I mean, they do upset certain other lineages in China. I know that Cui Zhongshan, the grandson of Cui Yishi, he didn't like Wang lineage one single bit. But personally, I think Cui Zhongshan is pretty bad at Tai Chi. I wouldn't learn from him even if he pays me, but that is my opinion. But other than a few parties in the Beijing Tai Chi community, there's not much that we can disprove with the Wang Yongquan lineage. Okay, I mean there are people who say that Wang Yongquan is not a disciple of Yang Taichi, he wasn't on the list, but the list that published in 1934. But like I've already said in the previous video, the list showed the most important disciple of Yang Taichi at the time. So there are a lot of disciples that weren't on the list, okay? And so not being on the list doesn't mean you're not a disciple. And furthermore, even if he wasn't, just because, the fact that his father was the steward or the butler for the prince that Yang Jianhou taught, one can know that he definitely has a solid connection to the Yang family and definitely has received genuine teaching, right? He didn't just fake his claim and made up his Tai Chi. That is not possible. So yeah, that's probably the other minor debate or argument that I can think of. Other than that, there's really not much to talk about for this episode. But the next episode should be a lot more content. We're going to talk about my own grandmaster, Shi Ming, who is being voted one of the top 10 Wu or the fake Qi masters of the century, right? So I'm going to talk about that and my own experience and a lot of other things, and also his controversy with the Wang Yongquan lineage, why he was kicked out eventually, etc., etc. So those things will come in the next episode, and depending on the content, I might have to make into 2 parts. So we'll see how that goes. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, please subscribe on YouTube so you can get my latest content the moment it's uploaded. And if you can, please support me on Patreon. That will help me greatly, and allow me to make more quality videos on a more regular basis. Because we all know that during this lockdown, there's really not much for for me to do. I can't teach classes outside, and there's no freelance graphic design work, unfortunately, because the economy is dying, and advertising is like the first thing to go to cut budget on, and those and when they do have work, they're gonna use in-house designer. They're not gonna outsource it to freelancers. So yeah, so any help on Patreon would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, again, guys, stay safe, stay healthy, stay social distanced from other people. Right, this is serious. People actually die from it. Take it seriously, and hope everyone will keep well and stay healthy. Thanks for watching TriEssence Martial Art channel, and I will see you next time.